Mini episode 293 of the FDH Lounge is brought to you by the Pullins Group, delivering public affairs consulting and marketing services for small businesses trying to grow. Follow them on the web at pullinsgroup.com.
The FDH Lounge. You'll want to schedule your life around it.
A long time ago, on a gloomy, wet Cleveland spring night, two men stand alone amidst the late-night drizzle. Their voices echo across the vacant station parking lot as they debate the merits of the great American radio show that have been missing for far too long. On that night, an idea was born. That idea became the FDH Lounge. Welcome to the FDH Lounge.
Okay, everyone, welcome to FDH Lounge, mini episode number 293. A very, very special treat. Once again, it's I, Rick Morris, back together with Kyle Ross. You know it's going to be football season coming up soon, but first, we're talking a little Breaking Bad here today. Kyle, my man, so good to be back with you again.
Yeah, I feel I should be doing double duty here. I should have a mascot for one of these things so people don't know that it's me, you know. Harken to the old days. But yeah, it's great to see. It's been too long.
Yeah.
And obviously football season brings my return, but you know, if there's one other thing I do love, it's Breaking Bad. I'm happy to talk about it with you.
Absolutely. We instituted this last week on the program here. I'm going to have this as an ongoing segment through the end of this abbreviated second half of the season, the final season of Breaking Bad, of setting up after every episode the five biggest developments heading into the next episode. And again, I'm prepared to do this as a solo most weeks, as I did last week, just kind of lay it out there, let you, the listeners, kind of take it all in. Where possible, through the rest of the way here, we may incorporate some other folks in. I do know my old friend and a fellow Bobcat, actually, Kimberly Potts, the great TV reviewer at Yahoo TV. Good chance of getting her in for one of these things here the rest of the way. But Kyle, like myself, a huge Breaking Bad fan, so again, there's the general setup is, again, just the five top developments in order going into the next one. I'm going to read these off here, Kyle, as I have this, and then at the end, you tell me where you think I'm right and where I'm wrong as far as the importance on these.
Okay.
Top five developments setting the tone for episode 5.11. Number 5. The fortune gets buried in the desert. Given the program's many, many ties to the desert outside Albuquerque, the notion of buried treasure was perhaps inevitable, but was a thrilling development nonetheless. One of the major questions about the remaining 6 episodes will be the person who ends up digging up Walt's cache. Early guess, it won't be Walt. Number 4, the most personal showdown in Breaking Bad history. Walt and Jesse have had quite a twisted bond that has informed their conflicts, and Walt and Hank brought decades of history to their conflict in the garage last week. But Skyler and Marie are loving sisters who've been through so much together. The betrayal that Marie conveyed in that scene, culminating with the slap and her relapse into kleptomania when she tried to seize her niece.
Oh.
You see what I did there?
That was very good. I didn't pick up on that. Yes.
Thank you. That conveyed an emotional resonance even beyond the importance of the plot point. Number 3, Hank blows his big chance to drive the wedge between Walt and Skyler, as Hank simultaneously conveyed an unintentional lack of regard for Skyler's legal fate and his inability at the moment to prove what he knew to be true about Walt. Skyler's fear for her own well-being coincided with a ruthless calculation that loss of family wealth and dignity were potentially avoidable. Even in the final run of episodes, you had to know Hank wasn't going to wrap up the case this quickly. Number 2, this is where it gets controversial maybe because of where I got number 2 and number 1. Number 2, Hank and Jesse are back in each other's orbits now that Walt's erstwhile sidekick is under police investigation for pitching millions of dollars out the car window during his fugue state. Hank botched the interrogation of Skyler at the diner. His interactions with Jesse, cruelly held off as a cliffhanger leading into next week, will tell just how much he learned from that initial ham-handed approach. And the number 1 development from this past week, Crazy Lydia orchestrates a massacre of Declan's crew in order to try to restore higher quality to the meth manufacturing process. In TV parlance, this was the B story behind the A story of the deterioration of the White Schrader family bonds, but the alliance of Lydia, the Czech drug pushers, and the Aryan crew led by Todd's uncle looks to be the one Walt is battling in the flash forwards representing the end of the series. Drama surrounding Walt, his family, and the DEA really looks like it's going to wrap up well before then. So, points of agreement and disagreement, Kyle.
Well, you threw a lot at me.
Okay.
Well, let's go back.
Let's intense.
It was. I thought we were going to go one by one here, and
okay.
We're going to need to go back to the top.
All right, fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
The fortune getting buried in the desert.
Yeah.
And the whole notion that it will not be Walt digging it back up.
Yeah.
I would agree with that just because doing that leaves it so open-ended to someone else. Now, I don't know how. It's going to be tough because the way he has it coded with the lottery ticket, that's not something that's going to be easily picked up on.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I don't know if any... Honestly, I would bet no one getting it more than a specific person at this point.
I've read that as a possibility.
Because,
like you, I read a ton of stuff online.
I mean, it just... The way it was done, I mean, I don't know. I mean, obviously not, having read anything, not having the benefit of it's screening advanced episodes, I don't know what could happen, but I haven't seen anything that would lead me to believe that anyone would pick up on that. I mean, he's got kind of the own personal thing. I mean, he didn't even let Skyler know what he did with it at that point. So he's the only one who knows. Who knows? I mean, with the cancer coming back or whatever, I mean, he could let it slip out. We've seen that happen.
I don't think Skyler would want to know at this point because she could have it pulled out of her. I mean, the whole reason that he had gotten it there, she very much approves of the fact that he diverted it.
It could be the reason he comes back as Mr. Lambert.
Okay.
It could be. I mean, it certainly could be. Moving to your next point about Marie and Skyler.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was probably the best scene. It was so... I have loved the tempo so far of the first two episodes because, I think everyone was in agreement after last week. They were really glad they just cut to the chase and had Hank call out Walt right off the bat. Let's not screw around. We all know what's going on. Let's do it.
Walt kind of pushed it, though. Walt almost walked out of the garage.
He did. You're right. It was, ironically, it was Walt that caused it.
Yeah.
But it was, nevertheless, the fact that showdown happened in episode, 1 of the final 8 was great. And I think the opening 15, 20 minutes of this episode was just so frenetic. Like, you were kind of on the edge of your seat. And the characters, they were almost like breathy. Like, they were like, they couldn't believe what was going on. And the Hank Skyler to Marie Skyler, those were both great. So, yeah, it was a great scene. There's not really... I mean, Marie is always going to kind of be a bit
very
player.
Dramatic.
Yeah, but she's always going to kind of be a bit player. I don't think she is going to have...
She's dramatic about dinner being burned. How dramatic is she going to be about what Walt's been doing,
Well, the whole, you have to get him, that was a very nice kind of closing line to that whole...
Absolutely.
2 scenes together. But I don't think... I mean, now that the relationship between the 2 sisters is shattered... I think that was kind of the high point of that dynamic for the rest of the series. And interesting, for those who may not know Lambert, there's all these Mr. Lambert references that in the flash forward at the beginning of the first part of the season, Walt was carrying a fake ID that said Mr. Lambert. Would not have picked up on this had I not read things online. Lambert is the maiden name of Skyler and Marie.
There's another assumption people are making about the flash forward that I think is kind of reckless, and it goes to an instance of my own stupidity back in the day. Like you, I suspect, when I was spending my 4 years at the Harvard on the Hocking, I at one point had, I had 2 different fake IDs back in the day. But I made the mistake on
I would just walk in and see where the wind took me.
Okay. Well, I actually put like some of my legit info on there, like everything but my birth date. And I just moved the birth date back 2 years on mine. But what I'm thinking when I'm looking at this is everyone's like, oh, it's Walt's 52nd birthday. How do you know that? It's Mr. Lambert's birthday. You know what I mean?
No.
Well, how do you know he's using the same birthday as Walt White? People are making an assumption. Would he be as stupid as I was and put your actual info?
Well, he did just celebrate his 51st birthday, right?
Right. But I'm saying it could be beyond his actual 52nd birthday because it's not Walt White's driver's license. It's Lambert's driver. Now, maybe it's got the same birthday, but we're all jumping to that same conclusion. And as somebody who back in the day, like I said, maybe didn't have I never got in trouble, thank God, back in the day. But, again, as somebody that didn't do the brightest thing and actually put some of my legit info on my fake ID, don't assume that people do that. He might be smarter than I was.
Plus, the real time. Actually, at that point, I think is the real time a year? It doesn't seem like it. That seems too quick.
Yeah, he's gonna grow back all that hair by then. I mean, he's still completely bald. He's got a nice...
I guess that is true.
He's got a nice
rug.
Fluffy...
Is it a rug? Did he call size Spurley?
Could be. But,
moving forward. So that'll be interesting. You're right. I was wondering because the 51st birthday was right at the end of the first half.
Yes.
Of the second. So real time. I don't think these 8 episodes are
going
to
encapsulate. But here's the thing, though. Remember...
And there was no time elapsed, remember, in between the 2 parts.
Gliding Overall, which I believe was the title of the end of the first half of the season. Remember that one, because I'd said previously on the show, that's the closest thing we've ever seen to a standalone movie. That covered like 3 months. that covered like almost 20% of the time.
Okay, but still, it was his birthday that day, right? At the end, when Hank was over.
No,
right?
no. You're thinking of a little bit earlier. Skyler walked into the pool on his 51st birthday.
Okay, you're right.
So,
okay.
but Kyle, it wasn't that much before that. It wasn't
Okay.
that much before. So what I'm saying is, this last season leaves you 6 to 9 months if you believe his birth date is that day. I don't want to sidetrack, but
I don't think that's going to be a big thing.
Yeah,
you know.
I don't want to be
me.
guilty of leading it down a rabbit hole if I haven't already. But no, that's that was just a thought that I had.
All right, totally agree with you on your third point about Hank blowing the chance.
Yeah.
I think most people who follow this show closely are of the opinion that certainly this show is not going to end with truth, justice, and the American way prevailing. I mean, Hank, looking through his character's eyes, that character's dream scenario would obviously be arrest Walt and get all this praise. That's not going to... It would, be kind of a lame ending.
Did you get the vibe right off the bat that I did that Skyler wasn't going to be going for this?
Oh, yeah, there's no way. She's not going to be complete.
Because
that
Hank
was the whole
ham-handed.
Yeah, Hank kind of thought, like, he must have forced you into this. He obviously figured, and Marie did too, and when, all the things with the kids and the walking into the pool, the weird way she'd been acting. But I think, they were of the opinion she was Walt's indentured servant.
Right.
Not complicit in the whole thing. I mean, they have, with the car wash and stuff, so...
And she's gotten past that. Remember, she's thinking about a second car wash at this point.
Yes, yeah. So, end result, I don't see Hank arresting Walt at any point. I just don't see that happening. I think that's what they... because, they set it up with, towards the end of last night's episode, that, I just can't go in and do this. They're going to be like, oh, my God, it's your brother,
Right.
It's your brother-in-law this whole time. You're an idiot. And he would
either
sort
an idiot or corrupt.
Yeah, he would
choice.
sort of have this professional egg on his face. That was, I mean, I don't know if I believe that so much realistically, but it was obviously done to draw the storyline out.
Sure.
But the end result is going to be he will not arrest Walt.
Right.
Your fourth point here, obviously the Hank, Jesse, Walt, the whole Jesse dynamic, let's say. Jesse is to the point now, there's a discussion, there's sort of been a debate. There's going to be a major death in the final 6 episodes, and the smart money would probably be either Jesse or Skyler.
I think there's going to be more than one.
Oh, well, define me. I mean, that will be the biggest. I don't think both.
Okay.
One will be. I think.
What about Walt Jr. and Holly? One or both of them could bite it, too.
I wouldn't call that major, believe it or not.
Really?
I don't think they're major characters. I mean, they're sort of...
They're so important to the motivation, though.
True. Thematically,
yes.
I guess it would be.
Yes.
But as far as a character, they're not major.
Right.
They've never had a. There's,
Right.
I mean, certainly Holly, and
Right.
and then Walt. They've never had an episode built around them. I mean, when I talk about the major characters, I mean you're talking about Walt, Jesse, Skyler, and then the Schraders.
Yes.
Basically. I mean, I would even elevate Lydia at this point, who we'll talk about, over the children. I would bank on Jesse just because I think that character, he's not even talking anymore, and he seems so motivationless, like he has no motivation. That I think that character, at this point, there's nothing left to do with it.
Right.
Unless I guess he could snitch on Walt, and in the preview of they had a voiceover. I didn't know what a monster he'd become, but I would bank that Jesse is going to bite the dust. He will not make it through the full season.
That's probably a pretty good bet.
And it will. I have no idea which way they're going to go with the beginning of next week's episode with the Hank Jesse confrontation. I don't know where that's going to go. After that, I'll be a lot. I think that's going to set the tone for the rest of Jesse's character throughout the season.
Well, nothing climactic is going to happen, and I know one of the few things I've been spoiled on to date. In TV Guide, I was reading their thing a couple weeks ago. Hank, in the 4th episode, there's a scene where he's furiously driving Jesse around town. So
I thought that was him crashing his car in episode 1.
No. It's like he's driving Jesse around Albuquerque. I don't know if it's trying to get him to talk, whatever, but he's not going to immediately get him to talk next week. That's one of the
No, you're right.
alert.
I mean, it's going to be because everyone's anticipating what's going to happen. They're not going to.
And they never go the easy route.
No,
anyway,
you're right.
So I'm not
you're
really
right.
spoiling anybody.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Jesse's going to next. I think eventually he will, just because other than turning on Walt, there's nothing left for him to do.
And we
as a
talked
character.
about it off air. Walt's many betrayals of him, he covered his tracks so well.
Yeah, I don't know how he's going to...
The only tiny loose end is that Saul was complicit in poisoning Brock. And if Saul ever has either an attack of conscience, yeah, right, or decides Walt's got to go because he's too big of a danger, he could try and turn Jesse on him by saying, hey, don't hate me for my part in this. But Walt decided to poison Brock.
True. And
That's it.
But you're right. The Jane thing, there's almost no loose end from that, at least that I can think of.
And no loose ends about Mike. Unless you count Todd. Who's Todd going to snitch to?
No, but here's the thing. The Mike thing, Jesse, if you remember in the first episode, he kind of figured it out.
Yeah, he kind of knows.
Remember when he's like, oh, no, the way you are, you'd be so worried about Mike coming back to get you.
And so did Saul. He sent him to Belize.
Yeah. So Jesse, I think, has figured that out.
Okay.
He said it, and Walt with just, I mean, how despicable can he be? Those lies he told him. But so that's the thing. You're right. I think it'll be interesting to see where they go with the Hank Jesse confrontation. But I believe Jesse is going to bite the dust.
Probably.
And then you're right with this whole Lydia thing.
So that's the biggest development. You agree with me because of where it's going in the long run?
Yes.
Okay.
Because I think the writers have, and rightly so, had everyone focused on the Schrader-White dynamic.
Yes.
That it's like, oh, well, here's this Lydia thing. It was funny because when they brought her back in that car wash scene in the first episode, there were a lot of people that were they're like, oh, God. There was sort of this feeling, we don't want Walter cooking anymore.
Right.
He's a drug dealer retiring. I don't think you get a gold watch. Yeah. But it was sort of like, okay, that's over and done with. Mm-hmm. There's no reason for that character to do that anymore. So people were sort of like, oh, God, is that where are they going with Lydia? And people wanted that to go somewhere. And it was great what they did. The whole thing, I wasn't really expecting that. Todd was brought back into the fold. I don't know where it's going, but there's only so much they can do with the Schrader-White thing unless if they just blow through it.
Right.
And so that will be – I don't know where that's going to go. I don't know if they are going to – they're going to kidnap Walter's children or do something. If this new cartel, for lack of a better term, is going to do something to Walt in an effort, to bring Walt back, try to get Walt back into the fold. Mm-hmm. I'm guessing that's probably what it is. Maybe that's why Walt comes back as Mr. Lambert with a machine gun.
Could be.
But, yeah, I think that's going to be the biggest thing moving forward because all the focus is on Hank and Jesse right now.
Yes.
And there's, believe it or not, with the way they did it, there's only so much more mileage you can go, I think, with 6 episodes. So, I think that, yes, I agree with you. I think I totally agree with you, believe it or not. And I don't think it's as controversial as you think. I think maybe the lay person who's not focused on that as much, it might be shocking. But I think people that follow it know that, yes, that's going to be
that
the
got
end
a tiny percentage of the screen time last night. Really just
the
one
one
extended scene.
I mean,
it was a long
and it was
scene.
sort of like when it started, you're like, oh, what's going on here? Because, you had all those dramatic episodes, or dramatic scenes, pardon me, Hank, Skylar Marie, and it just sort of came out of nowhere, and you didn't realize what was going on until she kind of looked at the phone, and it was well done, and I just, to be honest with you, I think that's where it's going. I think they are going to try to goad Walt back into the business by nefarious means, and that brings Walt back from New Hampshire. Where he will relocate. He will disappear from justice. Yeah. Probably with Skylar.
Probably, yeah.
And I don't know what else could get him back except do they figure out the money?
Maybe. But that's you keep thinking
what would bring what are the things that would bring him back?
Let's threat on the family or the family getting murdered. And that's the whole thing here too.
If they find him in New Hampshire?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's been the theory all along. And by the way, as far as people getting wiped out, not going to lie, going to miss Declan, that kind of Miami Vice savoir-faire that he sort of had there. The scruffy criminal kind of look to him there.
Yeah, but he was. Every scene he was in was the same. It was him standing with his legs spread too far, like 2 guys behind him in the desert.
Insanely gruff-sounding voice.
Yes, yeah, he was.
There's no man under 50 that sounds as gruff as he does with every sentence.
Yeah, it reminded me of all those meetings in Usual Suspects. I think. Who was the guy? who was that bad guy?
Kaiser Soze, yeah.
Well, no.
Oh.
The guy who introduced them, who gave him the job.
Oh,
Remember,
yeah.
he's in a bunch of things. That guy, I can't remember, but he reminded me of that. Like every scene that where everyone was standing way too far apart, talking in the desert.
That's true.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think you got it. I think you
Okay.
got it, and I'm fired up. I'll tell you what.
Yep.
It's very funny. A lot of these shows end sort of because there's so much pressure to end it in this big way.
Yep.
What did you think about The Sopranos, the way it ended?
I
I didn't like it.
No, I didn't either. You got to have some kind of...
Mainly because I hate Journey.
Well, there's a reason.
I think, honestly, it's that's a very ancillary reason,
Okay.
obviously. But, it's funny, whenever I hear that song,
Right.
I always think of the end of The Sopranos now.
Right.
Which, I guess is good for Steve Perry's career, but,
Yes.
not so much, Jamie
Well,
Lynn
Lounge guest
Sigler's.
Steve Perry,
Yes,
yeah.
I'm sorry, by the way. Come on again, Steve.
Yes.
But, I didn't really like the way that ended. The highbrow communities, oh, don't you get it? And it's like, yes, I get it. It just was unsatisfying. Even The Wire, that ended better than The Sopranos, but I don't think it was like that great satisfying ending.
Mm-hmm.
Although it was kind of cool, like how nothing works out.
Yeah.
Nothing works out in the end. All the you had to like it. No matter how liberal we could be and idealistic, it just doesn't work out.
Yet. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I don't have HBO.
Oh.
Well, you already gave me the spoiler the one time. Apparently, Stringer Bell doesn't make it all the way through.
Oh,
so-
excuse me. Sorry about that.
No, that's
But,
fine. That won't impede my enjoyment. when
I
do
always
watch
assume
it.
you watch these programs.
I don't have HBO.
Well,
so.
it's not TV. It's HBO.
Yes.
You have to understand. Okay.
Yeah, I don't have that. I don't have a Showtime. So anything that's been on those, like I only watched Entourage after the fact on DVD. I only watched Deadwood after the fact
You
on
gotta
DVD.
get with the program here, Rick.
Deadwood is awesome, by the way. I think
I
I'm
only
starting
watched
to get
like
my
the
boy
first season.
Jason Jones on
Yeah,
there.
I got to start watching. I kind of gave up on it, but
It's really
not
good.
because it was bad, just because it was a bad night. I think there's too many other
Okay,
things.
yeah,
But
it's slow at the outset.
but this show, I think, more than, and obviously Mad Men hasn't ended yet. I think this show more than any other could have the best ending potentially.
Yeah,
Because a lot of the key pieces are still in place, and you just don't know.
Yeah.
So, they do a good job of kind of, they have a track record of successful, of booking a successful finish to a season, for
Yes.
lack of a better term. Like, for instance, season 4, it was the whole power struggle between Walt and Gus Fring, and
Mhm.
Gus Fring lost. I won. Was obviously the
Yeah.
famous last words. They did that right. It wasn't too artsy. It was here's a conflict, one guy wins. So this, sure, it could be artsy, but I'm looking forward to it.
I've been saying, I think this could be, and I want to treat this like, I don't want to go along with this corporate BS of it's season 5 part 2. No, this is season 6. I mean, I'm going along with the labeling purposes just so there's no confusion. But realistically, to me, this is a separate season. That's how I look at it. And looking at it
Not
that
really.
way,
I mean, the way
I think it's
there was no time elapsed between the two.
well, there wasn't much time elapsed between 4 and 5, was there? Because Walt was going and throwing out the plant that he used to poison Brock at the
Or
beginning
3
of
and
season
4.
5.
Or 3 and 4.
There's never been any.
Yeah,
there's never been
that's
any
true.
skipping.
Okay, well,
but
excuse me.
Here's the thing. Here's the thing, though. But I've been saying, like, I think this, season 6, if you want to call it that, I think it could be the best one yet. And what a mouthful that is, because 3 and 4 were just insane. Maybe even 2 to an extent. I mean, it's been so great all the way through. My favorite act pretty much has been the second act of the thing. Once Saul, Gus, Mike kind of came into play. Act 3 is kind of moving past that in my mind. Act 1 was the slowest one because it was the build-up to everything with the Super Lab. I've got a friend that I'm trying to coach through that right now. Like, stay with it until Saul Goodman is involved. And
Yeah,
Gus
because you
Fring and
hear
Mike
the problem is
Catino.
it's hard to block all the noise about the show.
Right.
And Walt was still kind of a good guy at the
Yeah.
beginning. You kind of rooted for. You're like, oh, he's just doing it for his family. Why do all these things go wrong? And I mean, I still liked it a lot. In with the first, the first season was interesting because the writer's strike only did the 7 episodes,
Right.
so there wasn't a ton of meat there. But
it was kind of slow as far as until Saul came into the picture, because it was them trying to handle distribution. As Saul says to them, you two suck at peddling meth. But it was like they had to kind of find their way through that. And it's like you needed to show all of that.
You know what?
But it's the least satisfying sitting through.
Have you ever heard this? Vince Gilligan did not know about weeds when he pitched.
Yes, I heard that.
When he pitched this show to AMC.
He got very pale in the face when he found out.
And he said, had he known about weeds, he wouldn't have done this show.
Yeah.
What's it? Did you ever watch Weeds? I know you
I
just
don't
said you
have
didn't have Showtime.
yeah.
Okay.
No, I haven't seen it,
This
yeah.
just in, folks.
Yeah.
Ricky doesn't have premium channels. Let's see how many times I have to ask him until I can figure it out. But, all right, well, I did. And what's
Okay.
funny with Weeds is, I'm not going to tell you anything in case you ever watch it, but the first 2 seasons, 2.5 seasons, I thought were really great. A buddy of
Okay.
mine, Chad Repack, had to get his name referenced in the show.
The Bob Sacramento
Yes.
program.
He said at the beginning, he's like, the thing with this show is it's not great, it's not elite, but it'll always be good because it's too hard to screw up. You have a hot chick selling weed, and that's was a good point. They screwed it up. Okay. Let me. It didn't get good.
Spoiler
it got goofy.
alert.
Spoiler alert! It ain't that good anymore. And it's funny because I thought the shows were fairly similar at the beginning. The suburban, non-traditional drug dealer that encountered traditional drug dealing problems, they didn't know how to cope with it. There were some
And living a
similarities.
double life and
Yeah, there were
everything.
some, and
Yeah.
keeping it from the family. There was a lot of similarities, but you're right. It's after those 2 acts where the
Yes.
shows became very different. Where Breaking Bad went all-time great, and
Right.
Weeds sort of plateaued and then got bad. So, in many ways, I loved the like they were very similar. Those first 2 acts. I wanted to compare it to that.
Yeah, no, that's a great point.
Yeah, so they were, and there was a lot of that. So if you liked Weeds and kind of that whole dynamic of the non-traditional drug dealer having traditional drug dealer problems, it was good. And I thought it was. I mean, there was great scenes. The second episode of the second season where they're kidnapped by Tuco. That's an unbelievable. That's one of the 5 or 7 best episodes I think of the show.
It is, and I got
Certainly top 10.
I got a friend that's bitching at me like, well, there hasn't much that's happened since, like an episode or 2 later. Well, there hasn't been much that happened since Tuco kidnapped him. Well, you're looking at an episode or 2 later. Now, the thing that Gilligan has done from the beginning is he'll put in times when you have to kind of breathe and kind of reset the story. Perfect example of that is, we talked about it before, 51 last season. That was one where I was in New York for the week. I didn't get to see the thing live. I didn't get to see it till like early Friday morning.
Which one was this?
This was 51. And I watched it, and it was like, that was Walt's 51st birthday. Skylar watched it in the pool. And it was like, I thought like it was kind of like a slow episode. I'm like, thank God I saw that now, because I thought like whatever I'd be seeing, I'd be like dying to like for Sunday night. And it was like, they needed to kind of slow it down. They needed to kind of reset things. But it wasn't the most exciting thing. It wasn't like the train heist. It wasn't like the magnets. It wasn't like the other ones.
There was that one episode, The Fly,
The
which
Fly,
at the time was a
Perfect
slow
example.
episode.
Bottle episode,
But in retrospect, it's kind of hailed as one of the better ones.
Yeah.
But at the time, in the grand scheme of the plot,
yes,
it was one of those ones that was sort of in the middle of ones that they all advanced the plot. All these storylines kept going on their trajectory, and that one was like, no.
Isn't that the sign of a great show, of a truly all-time great show, of like where we can sit here and be like, okay, that wasn't the most enthralling one of all time, but I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt because they probably needed to kind of slow it down for storytelling purposes, set the pace for what's to come. The slack that we cut them and the understanding we give them is because it is such an all-time classic.
True. And you know what? I thought The Sopranos got, obviously, is a show that's on the same par. They got a lot of rope with those, too. And I thought they actually, by the end of the show, had it expended.
Yeah.
You know, David, with the dream sequences and stuff,
Very
they did a lot of
yeah.
those. And they always sort of reeked of, okay, this is where we're going to allow James Gandolfini to win the Emmy.
Yeah.
Or Edie Falco to win the Emmy. You know, that Breaking Bad, okay, yeah, they'll do that every once in a while, but they don't feel wasted. Nothing's wasted in this. Those ones, you know, after the first times they would do them, because, I mean, obviously you can't have just this frenetic plot every episode of every season. And The Sopranos was fine, but towards the end, I thought they did a few too many of those kind of The Fly. It's like, okay, the acting's great here, Gandolfini's phenomenal, but it's, you know, there's too many artsy episodes and we're not going with the plot enough. Breaking Bad has always been able to walk that. They do an episode like that, but the plots never drag, really, for the most part.
No, they don't. They don't. And it's a show singularly focused on the one plot. That's what kind of sets it apart also, too, because The Sopranos, you had a lot more subplots and everything like that. This is the story of, is Walt going to get away with it or die or whatever? And the other things are completely ancillary to that. This is a show about one singular story. And
it's basically... It's funny when you hear people talk about Breaking Bad. You know what it is? It's a heel turn, Ricky. Walter White, this show is basically
a double turn.
A very artistic heel turn.
How about the pilot, though? How about what a dick Hank was to Walt at his party, like lording his macho self over him at his 50th birthday party? It's a double turn, because Hank was not a sympathetic character in the beginning. He was just a chest puffed out, full of bluster blowhard.
He was
It's
also
a double
sort
turn.
of almost like the kind of meatball comedic relief guy.
Yes.
I thought. I didn't think he was ever like a bad guy.
Not a bad
but he
guy.
was. You're right. He was not
But because-
ever positioned as a protagonist like he
Right.
is now.
Because you were sympathizing with Walt, part of sympathizing with Walt is the cross that he had to bear of his brother-in-law as this swaggering, ultra,
His son looked up to him.
Yeah,
Hey, what did
yeah.
Uncle Hank do? Yes.
alpha male.
Yes.
And so it wasn't so
Yes.
much that Hank was a bad guy, but I've seen a lot of it that over the period of time it's the double turn because, again, aside from the few disturbed people on the planet still rooting for Walt at this point, Hank is the
we're not
protagonist.
supposed to do that?
Hank is the protagonist.
We're not supposed to be
right?
rooting for Walt anymore?
Don't tell it to Julie Bowen from the first Talking Bad there.
Oh, oops.
During her coked up rampage, allegedly. No.
I'll tell you what. You know what's funny is when everyone, like with Mad Men with Don Draper, because they're doing kind of a similar thing with Don on that. Where they
Yeah.
made him gradually more unlikable.
Right.
It's funny to compare the two programs, and they always bring up, Don, he's just this sexist, alcoholic pig. How can I'm like, we're supposed to hate him for those reasons? I'm like, I always kind of held him in high regard how he used to get away with all those affairs. I was always like, God, how does he do that? It's like, it's like, how does he just show up drunk to these random bars and get these women to go home with him? That never works. I'm like, Roger Sterling's a bad guy for being a misogynist. I liked him.
So you're a big fan of the Grantland Don Draper finger bang ratings, eh?
Yes.
I don't like that.
Yeah.
But no, that's, again, you're right. It is the story of a heel turn, a double turn, however you want to look at it. But yeah, Mr. Chips turns into Scarface, as Vince Gilligan has said in interviews a gazillion times over. And we're at that point. He's made the transformation. The interesting thing is the tease in the last episode or two of maybe the turn back. There weren't too many Heisenberg moments in this episode. He seemed pretty pathetic lying there in the bathroom. That was Walt White, not Heisenberg, lying in the bathroom.
Agreed. It was totally different than the season 5A. Pardon me. But he was full on Heisenberg in the first half of this final season.
Absolutely.
And now that honestly, the big thing is that he's not cooking anymore.
Right.
I mean, that fueled the Heisenberg persona,
Right.
the whole making money. But he sort of reached the end game with that, with the deal with the Czech Republic, and there's really no need to be Heisenberg. Now, I think to preserve himself and his family, he's going to need to go back to being Heisenberg.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's coming, and we're seeing that here at this point. But again,
I feel I'm sitting with Heisenberg here as you have this T-shirt on, by the way.
Yes, I have my Heisenberg T-shirt.
Yes. And just for you, I wore a Hartford Whalers T-shirt today.
Very nice.
Yes, I also bought a Quebec Nordiques T-shirt too.
I'm
You're
very
probably going to roll
appreciative.
your eyes on that, by the way. That's kind of a hipster move, isn't it?
Well, I just don't like the Nordiques because they became the Colorado Avalanche. That's as a Red Wings fan, I can't countenance such a thing.
Yes.
But that's
You realize that rivalry was like 15 years ago.
and
the Colorado Avalanche stink now.
I still feel the hatred.
I don't know a ton about hockey, but I do know the Colorado Avalanche are pretty bad.
I still feel the hatred, and my favorite moment in sports still is Darren McCarty wailing on Claude Lemieux going into the turtle position. Claude Lemieux turtling under the fists and fury of Darren McCarty. It doesn't get any better than that for a great sports moment.
You know what I'm going to impress you by?
What?
Do you know the Quebec Nordiques were in the Adams division?
Wow.
Bet you didn't think I knew that, did you?
That is pretty strong.
There. I bet you didn't know I knew that, did you? I think Hartford was in the Adams division too, weren't they?
I think they were.
Yes.
I think
they need to
were.
go back to that.
This is it. Well, yeah, as opposed to the I can't think of what the one name. I think it was the Metropolitan Division, I think, is one of the 4 divisions that they've put in this year.
Oh, I don't like that.
Yeah, the Metropolitan.
Oh, that's right. They
Division.
realigned.
Yeah.
Oh, I need to look at that.
4 divisions.
I need to look
6.
at that.
Yeah. Before
I need to look at that real quick. here.
before it comes time for people to get down on hockey, certainly you need to. So
I need my Metropolitan Division Game of the Year.
that is, to bring this full circle, that is as shameless as anything Heisenberg ever said.
Thank you.
But I think we've sufficiently set the tone for episode 511 next week. So, Kyle, again, a pleasure to get to break this down with you. Thank you so much.
As we bring the show to a close, we would like to extend our deepest gratitude to NBC, CBS, ABC, Fox, all Clear Channel affiliates, TNT, TBS, USA, UPN, Deadspin.com, YouTube.com, YTMND.com, MySpace.com, various blogs, Fox News, CNN, CNBC, MSNBC, IamBoard.com, Billboard.com, Google.com, ESPN, ESPN2, ESPN News, ESPN Classic, NBA TV, NFL Network, Sports Time Ohio, Athlon Magazine, Comedy Central, Cartoon Network, The Boomerang Channel, QVC, BET, The Spice Channel, Steno Notebooks, Manwich, Papermate Office Supplies, waitresses, strippers, bartenders, garbage men, janitors, microwave popcorn, the writers of The Office, Scrubs, Entourage, My Name is Earl, Oz, Metalocalypse and the Boondocks, Aquafina, and the Periodic Table of Elements.